It's a little delayed sometimes.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Bitcoin Design Community Call with Galoy. Today, we want to show a challenge that we're facing currently in relation to a release that is going to come soon to the Bitcoin Beach wallet. And that is quite a groundbreaking thing because it will hopefully solve one of the major problems that users on the ground have, which is being exposed to the volatility, to the price volatility of Bitcoin, the asset. And the way this will be solved is, without getting too much into the technicals, is that users will have two wallets in the Bitcoin Beach Wallet app, and one will be a Bitcoin wallet and one will be a USD wallet. And users can basically determine if they want to keep their money in Bitcoin or if they want to keep it in dollars. They can determine how much they want to keep in Bitcoin, how much they want to keep in dollars. They can change their mind at any time. They can go full Bitcoin. They can have everything in dollars if they think the price is going to crash. And they can also determine whether they want, when they receive money, want to basically get that money into the USD wallet or into the Bitcoin wallet. So a lot of optionality here. We hope that this will actually make living on Bitcoin and using Bitcoin day in, day out, with all the obligations that people in El Salvador have, that they still denominate, and for a while into the future will denominate in US dollars, because that's the unit of account that they are used to. And pricing things in sats is still a little bit in the future, we hope. So yeah, we're very excited about this feature. I think it's very important in El Salvador for the people on the ground. But we're facing some design challenges here, namely to actually how should the user experience look like when users interact with these functions, with these new functions. We believe it should be intuitive for them to wrap their heads around it, not to make mistakes, to choose which currency they want to hold in their value in. And yeah, we are going to present today a first iteration of ideas. I'm joined by my colleague Pejman from Galoy, who is the designer, and he will basically walk you through the first iteration. I don't think we're there yet, but we just cranked out first designs, what it could look like. We think there are still a lot of things to improve, and we're very curious to hear the feedback from the community and solicit feedback, so we can, in the end, improve the design and offer the best user experience for this, for these complex functionalities. So with that out of the way, I'm gonna hand it over to Pejman, and he can then take it from there.
Sure, thanks for that, Kamal, and nice to meet you all. This is actually my first Bitcoin design meeting, and really looking forward to the future and collaborating with all of you. I've been tasked with working on a unique USD denomination feature for the Bitcoin wallet, as Kamal mentioned. Under the relentless lack of time that we have currently in Galoy, I've been able to work on an initial flow and hoping to implement that within within the current app itself, without necessarily having to redesign a lot of the user experience and the user interface itself. So we do have a few challenges in that front, but I think I'd love to get everyone's opinion. I've also pasted a Zeppelin link as well as a running Figma project. So feel free to view those in your own time and leisure. I believe the Zeppelin link you may need to request for an invite. So whoever would like to get access to that, feel free to send me your emails, and I'm happy to add you as a reviewer. So I'm just going to share my screen. I'm assuming that everyone here has some semblance of experience with the Bitcoin Beach wallet. I'm just going to go into Zeppelin, which is essentially a design developer handoff tool. And for the sake of this presentation, they do have a flow feature. So I wanted to basically just utilize that. So right off the bat, I'm not showing you the onboarding experience because that's kind of separate from this presentation, but we do have the home screen here as it stands. I do have a question starting right off the bat regarding maybe prompting the user based on which default wallet they would like to choose. But nevertheless, this screen here, BTC screen, no balance, is basically what they land on when they first come to the website, the app, or even the website, because we do have a web-based version of this in the works. So you have the total balance. So the combined balance of both your Bitcoin and your USD denominated wallets. Of course, this is zero at this point because there has been no transfers made to the app itself. There's a scan QR code, send, receive, and recent transactions. Basically, these are parts of the user interface that are withstanding at this point in Bitcoin Beach Wallet. You can see this version on the right where I have a total balance of $2,000, and immediately under that, you can show a display in the SATS equivalent. And apologies for the construction in the background. This section here is the convert. So you're able to basically see the breakdown of the different currencies. So basically, let's say your USD wallet has $1,000 and it's split evenly with your Bitcoin wallet, which is also $1,000, or 2,326,812 sats. You could also see the recent transactions here. I just noticed that there's a arrow missing here, so I'm just going to add that. Right. So maybe starting with what's in the spotlight right now, convert amount. We want to make it easy for people to convert from sats to dollars or vice versa. So, I mean, if you click on this particular button here, these fields would switch around, and instead of I want to convert sats to USD, it could go from USD to sats. You could also see which wallet this amount is being transferred to. So if you want to receive USD dollars, it could lead to the USD wallet March 22. Now, this might just be relegated to USD wallet. There's no name to it, but we're working on that and maybe considering naming the wallets at some point in time. We also want to perhaps provide an optional note or label for this transaction so people know what has transpired in the past. You also see, this is in Spanish, but you could see the equivalent of 1 BTC at a given time, and I believe that we are pinging our API multiple times a minute for that amount. You could click confirm conversion, and you see the convert amount, kind of a breakdown summary of everything. And when you confirm that, you see this screen where you can kind of see that you converted $100, for example, for so and so amount of sats. And of course, the numbers need to be updated because we're in a volatile market, but nonetheless, that is kind of the flow for converting from Bitcoin to dollars or dollars to Bitcoin. Coming back, I'd like to kind of show you the receive screen and the send screens as well. So this is the receive screens, and I think this is kind of the point of contention that I'm experiencing. I've been soliciting a lot of feedback from our developers within Galoy, and currently this is kind of what actually, let me just come to Figma here because I think it's easier for everyone to see. So basically these are the receive screens that we're currently playing with. And the default state for all the receive Bitcoin is to essentially create a generic or pre-made Lightning invoice address as the default state. You're able to copy that invoice. You're also able to request a specific amount, which we'll get into, but also the ability to choose whether this amount that you're receiving is sent to the Bitcoin wallet or the subsequent USD wallet as well. So you can see that I'm using color guides here. Lightning obviously being yellow and USD kind of being this indigo color. Let's say if you want to request a specific amount, this is basically creating that invoice further. You're able to put in an amount. You're also able to add an optional note what this is for. So whether it's pupusas and alzante, putting a numerical number here. And hopefully we would like to experiment with the idea of like, they could actually just request an amount in dollars instead of it being a Bitcoin sats amount. And they can just input that number in a dollar denominated amount. And the Lightning invoice would work as intended. And once, for example, they receive this invoice screen, it shows them that this is what it's for, what it is, what the amount is, and basically whenever they actually receive a certain amount coming into and landing on their app, this immediately goes into their USD wallet. And I believe we do have a technical requirement that USD invoices have a 2-minute timeout. So we want to show that at the bottom here, prompting the user to make that transaction as soon as possible. If something does happen, you're able to create another invoice quite easily and just starting the flow from the beginning. Let's just say if some time has passed, you're able to see this confirmation screen pop up on the site or on the app, depending on which denomination you chose.
Maybe let's ask if there are some foundational questions.
Sure.
I imagine this is a little bit, well, quite a novel thing to think about, that users are actually receiving, they can choose whether they want to hold Bitcoin or US dollars, but the rails are always Lightning. So there is no bank wire or happening or stablecoin transfer. It's all on Lightning. I think this is something to highlight. And users should have the optionality to choose which asset they want to store their value in. I think there's a question from Prem.
Sure thing. Go ahead.
if you go back to the very first screen where you show the balance.
Yes.
So, if you stick right there where the balance is 1000.13 for each wallet, right?
Yes.
You notice that the number of Satoshis that the user has in their wallet is 2.3 million or something like that.
Yeah.
But we're showing the balance to be 4.653 million. That's actually not accurate, correct? Because the Bitcoin balance is just 2.3 million Satoshis, and the rest is actually in USD right now. I mean, are you just doing a virtual conversion? Because that's not a true ledger entry at this point.
Yeah, so the thought here is that this would also equate to 2.3 on the left side as well. Since it's just a USD wallet, there has been some internal discussion whether we should show sats for the USD wallet itself, but what we want to show is basically a total balance that is being combined here at the top, right? So I guess the missing thing that's throwing you off is like there should be another 2.3 million on the left side, so you can kind of do that quick math in your head.
It's not just that. So right now in our wallet, in the Galoy wallet, even though the price fluctuates, the number of Satoshis remains static. At least some people are beginning to understand that hey, the unit of account could be just Satoshis if you want the stability. But if we start adding Satoshis now to USD, suddenly Satoshis also becomes dynamic. Like it's no longer static. Like Satoshi, the Satoshi amount does not fluctuate with the price, is what I'm trying to get to. And if we do that, then even that will fluctuate.
I agree. I think that's going to be a somewhat confusing point, because like you have the idea that there's a fixed amount of Bitcoin in the wallet, and that you come to understand that the fiat price fluctuates. Hopefully somebody comes to understand that, right? But
right
now you have a situation where both balances fluctuate, just depending on whether they choose. I guess I'm assuming they can choose for their total balance whether to show the big number in dollars or in sats. So you now have a situation where both balances appear to the user to be fluctuating, and
yes,
that seems like that could be a scary idea to some people. And my initial instinct is that maybe it should just be conceptualized as two balances instead of one in entire thing. But I'm not sure.
I was thinking the same exact thing, Stephen, that maybe these need to be just two separate balances. And somewhere else, there's a total balance screen that then shows you, your total balance, maybe in USD at that point. Just a thought.
Thanks for that feedback. Yeah, I tend to agree with you. So we could definitely surface back on that. And you're happy to kind of look at Figma as it's evolving in the next few days and weeks. I'd love to get your feedback on that moving forward. Any other comments on the home screens?
I had a question. On that one screen, why not just on the Satoshi side? It does look confusing because you've got dollar signs, you've got the dollar symbol on both sides of the equation. Why not just make the Satoshi on the right, put that on the top and the dollar on the bottom, so that it's clear that you're looking at Satoshis on one side? Because right now it looks like dollars on both sides of that equation, and that's small screen for me right now. For some reason it went to smaller screen. Does that make sense?
So you're basically saying instead of the $1,000 on the right,
push the Satoshis, push the Satoshis on the top, and put make the dollars a smaller font. Just basically reverse the font and the positions on the right side, so that it's clear that that's Satoshis and not USD.
Yeah, we could definitely try that. I'm not sure if that's translated over effectively for the user, and that's obviously half the battle here, because everyone is, habituated to use or see the dollar amounts. So yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from. It's just that I think
you're still going to see the dollar amount, but it's going to just be below it. It looks too similar right now.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So one way of framing this might be, what is more important for the user to gain? What kind of information is more important for the user to gain quickly? So if the big giant bold number that stands out to me is like, okay, that's important, I'm supposed to get that information quickly. So is it more important that they see the number that the account is denominated in, or is it more important that they understand how much purchasing power this account has?
I would say the latter. Yeah, I would say the latter because the purchasing power makes more sense, in my opinion, and that's why I've been using the dollar amount as the prominent bold font that you see on there. So perhaps maybe we can even do away with the Satoshi on the bottom. So essentially, they're only looking at the breakdown of the dollar amount, even though Satoshi is basically denominated in equivalent Satoshi amount. But yes, I do tend to agree with you. So we could definitely revisit a lot of this, and this was kind of one of our main points of contention that we would like to solicit your comments on. Anything else on these screens?
I have quite a question that kind of applies to this and other screens. I'm running the I guess the Bitcoin Beach like test flight wallet on my phone, and one difference I tend to notice. I mean, I'm really liking visually how these designs are. Is the typeface, has it shrunken in size as opposed to the test flight version of the app?
I just basically opted to use the default SF Pro display, which is the iOS first font. My intention was to get started on the iOS version of this design. Now, perhaps for Android, that could just be relegated to like Roboto. Obviously, at some point, we want to revisit the entire branding guideline for Bitcoin Beach Wallet, but that's not for us to say at this point. So I would say that's kind of up in the air. Regarding the typography and everything, I've just kind of been using the default SF Pro display font throughout this set of screens.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was just curious. I don't have like a particular actionable piece of feedback here. I was just curious. One thing that really stood out to me about the existing Bitcoin Beach wallet was just that it was because the type was so large, it almost like it seemed like it felt to me like it was designed for someone who might be older, or someone who isn't used to digging through like lots of menus on a daily basis and all of that. But I think iOS has these different options built in for like scaling font size and all that. So no real like feedback or suggestion there. I was just curious.
Yeah, no worries. I would say I would agree to utilize the internal scaling for whichever iOS operating system that we're using. And there might be a version on the web wallet where we can allow that to be part of the settings as well, move down the line. But yeah, thank you.
Pejman, another question for you. Does it make any sense to use sliders instead of actual typing in dollar, the conversion amount? I mean, I just thought of this, so it's not like I put a lot of thought into it, but if I receive 4 million Satoshis, do I really know how much I want to convert into USD, or would it just be easier to slide and it does the conversion as I slide? That way I don't really have to think about it, and then I could double tap to confirm that's what I want the amount, and I could visually and virtually convert on the slide as much as I want to. And when I'm ready or happy with the conversion, then I could just double tap or tap to confirm that's the conversion amount I want. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting second version or alternative version that I could play around with, where you don't necessarily have to click this button to decide your denomination within the form itself. And you could just continue typing the numbers and choose it from maybe a drop down of sorts. I have worked on a particular project in the past where that was the case, so I could definitely revisit that, and I'd love to maybe get your opinion on that when I'm done with that as well.
In this current version, does the user only get to choose between the preset percentages, or can they like type in their own amount?
Yeah, so this is a good question, and usually like it's a battle between having a slider or just having those preset percentages. And of course, I've worked on an exchange project in the past, and the ones that are really kind of like the status quo are 25, 50, 75, and 100. So I wouldn't say these are solidified just yet. It was really just a way to break down the amount, so it's easy for them to consider as predefined percentages. But perhaps that could be a slider, and they could just choose how much based on how much they're dragging horizontally, right, on a line there. I don't know. I haven't seen any particular products out there which allow you to pre-designate your percentages, maybe in the settings, but that could be a little bit overkill for my first assumption. But that's an interesting notion nonetheless.
Yeah, I think I think it depends a lot on what like how these people are going to be using it, because what would be intuitive to me personally is if I want to think of like, okay, here's my Bitcoin Beach wallet. It's kind of like my bank account. It contains Bitcoin and it contains dollars. So all my daily, weekly, monthly expenses are probably denominated in dollars. So I need to make sure that I pay my rent this month, and I need to make sure that maybe I pay my utility, I pay for my groceries, something like that. But there's regular recurring expenses that I'm going to know that I need to have to pay in fiat. And so if I know how much I spend, on these expenses every month, let's say, just for the sake of making the math simple, that it's like $1,500 a month or something, then I want to be able to go to my wallet and say, I want to take $1,500 worth of Bitcoin and turn that into dollars. So what's intuitive that would be like if I were to use this wallet, that would probably be my personal use case, is just wanting to make sure that my monthly expenses are stored away in fiat. And for that, I would think about it as a X dollars worth of Bitcoin. So if I were to personally use it, what I would find useful is to be able to, say I want to convert, like I said, 1,500, 2K worth of Bitcoin into it, and not have to fuddle with the percentages or the sats. But that would be my personal use case. I'm not sure exactly what the users in El Zonte would think of that, though.
Very great feedback. I'll love to work on that a little bit further. Appreciate that.
Another thought would be maybe someone is always doing 25% or someone's always doing 50%. It may save a couple of steps for them if at the beginning when they set up, or at some point they could just say, from now until I change it, I want all of this to be converted 25% into USD and the rest into sats or vice versa. Just a way to kind of streamline things.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot we could do here. I think just for the sake of simplicity and getting this thing out of the door, I opted to just use the 4 different percentages. Maybe at some point you could designate on a separate screen or part of the menu where you could actually say, hey, this is my rent for the month. And you can just start creating expenses and how much in dollars you might expect to pay for them. And maybe in a further implementation of this screen, you could just choose additionally what you want to pay for, and you could just convert that amount of sats exactly. So yeah, I mean, I'm starting to kind of think about this a bit more, and I'm glad that you guys are mentioning it. I think there's a lot more we could do with the conversion screens. But for the time being, I think we wanted to kind of obviously keep it simple for development and implementation. Any questions regarding the receive screen? Because I know that personally, I'd love to get more thoughts and feedback around those.
One thing, just to want to bring your attention to the chat, Christoph, is a couple points in there just to acknowledge before we wanted to move on. So a good point on sliders, generally good for choosing values where precise amount doesn't matter, like volume or brightness. But for money and finance, precise numbers works well. And then I've added his second comment, which is the question: should convert amount on the top of the screen be transferred to wallet? So I've recorded that. Didn't want to interrupt, but I just wanted to capture that.
Yeah,
on these screens.
We honestly, like, we've been working so much with semantics and nomenclature in the past few days. You can see that it's like transfer here, comma there. Like, it's not lost on us. We're just kind of trying to work on those as well at the same time. But thank you so much for the feedback. Yeah, I mean, maybe I could just also explain what, at least from our CEO standpoint, the prerogative should be. Like, we want to really focus on Lightning as the method of receiving Bitcoins and sending Bitcoins. So I've really simplified these receive screens for that usage. Now, obviously, Lightning is new. It only came into being in 2017. Not every Bitcoiner out there probably even knows about Lightning. So if someone comes from some part of the world to Alzante and they don't necessarily have the ability to do Lightning transactions, or maybe there's just some kind of edge cases we're not accounting for, I think it's novel to still have on-chain functionality built in. Now, I think I speak for Nicholas and the team that we are going to move forward with just Lightning at this point. But I did also want to kind of consider what throwing in on-chain into the equation would look like. Now, we want to dissuade the user from using on-chain, obviously, but maybe making it harder for them to utilize it is the name of the game here. This might be a bit too obvious that there's kind of a horizontal selector between Lightning and on-chain. So I'd love to get your additional opinion on these particular screens and the use of colors for guiding the user on their selections as well. I've been thinking about it quite a bit, and I think this seems to me like the best way forward so far. But if we're going to basically disable or dissuade users from using on-chain, maybe then that needs to be a bit more, I'm losing my words here, but maybe a bit harder for them to utilize on-chain here as well. So obviously you have Lightning, on-chain. On-chain being kind of the darker orange, Lightning the yellow. The same options apply whether you're able to send to a BTC wallet or a USD wallet as well. If you choose USD, these two colors change to the indigo color. And the same thing happens for on-chain as well, hopefully. And you can see that the icons are doing quite a bit of the work and kind of explaining what's actually happening. So you have an arrow, diagonal arrow coming, Bitcoin, and a link for on-chain, whereas the other one is basically the same thing but with like a lightning arrow. So I'm trying my best to utilize those kind of those iconographies to drive the story. But yeah, I'd love to hear more thoughts about the receive screens in general.
Maybe just to add before I let Prem ask his question is, like, yes, Lightning is the default in El Salvador, and that should be encouraged. And there's also a very technical reason why on-chain address generation shouldn't be like super easy to do, because it puts some burden on the cluster, and therefore, like, Lightning should be the default, and on-chain should be one click away. This is not just a personal preference, but a little bit of a technical requirement of actually running a community bank like Bitcoin Beach wallet. Yeah, so that's just some additional context here. Prem, you had a question?
Yeah. So this kind of ties back into the previous conversation we had, a couple of weeks ago too, where we discussed the complexities with different payment protocols, and there's going to be a flow for users, and soon after that, Synonym.to came up with a solution where they could act as this bridge, which the sender does not need to worry about how the receiver is receiving the payments. And I'm wondering if technically we could adopt that solution and then just get rid of on-chain completely, and we just use Lightning, which will simplify the flow. And then because we, in between would sit the Synonym.to bridge, so to speak, where if it's an on-chain payment, they will handle it and handle the details for us. Is that something worth looking into?
Mal, did you have any thoughts on that?
I actually saw a quick demo of Synonym at the Lightning Hack Days here in Istanbul, and I'm not 100% sure I understood how it worked, but it seemed to unify a lot of different standards through kind of like a /pay. I think it's what they called it, but I'm not 100% sure if this is applicable here. Prem, maybe, I mean, if it does solve a problem, I think we'd be more than happy to look into it.
Yeah, I just wanted to plant the seed. I think that it may be a solution worth looking into, especially in light of the complexities you shared a couple of weeks ago with all the issues we'll run into with different payment protocols.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's interesting. We're kind of playing this chicken and before the egg game, where I think we're still in a very early on place with this space, and hopefully more consolidation of all these systems, and I really want to be able to leverage that at some point. I think it's just at this juncture, what do we do about making sure we have all our ducks in a row, right? Like, so as much as I don't want to use on-chain, I think it's something that we need to maybe still consider, just from a usability standpoint. But again, like, this is very much a kind of a triage that I'm doing on effect that I'm doing on the particular screens you're seeing, and hopefully in the next few months we're able to kind of like take a few steps back and really consider this from a first principle standpoint. Yeah,
there's a question from Christoph in the chat. Do I understand correctly that the transactions is always Bitcoin? Yes, that is correct. The transactions are always Bitcoin, and the user has an option to auto-convert the payment to USD. Yes, that is correct. That is an option. They can choose, actually, if they want to receive the payment into and hold the Bitcoin, the asset, or if they want to hold a synthetic USD where the USD value stays stable. And he continues, if so, should it maybe not be a left-right switch, but just a checkbox that reads convert to USD on receive or something like that?
Yeah, so it's great that you're mentioning that, because obviously I have played around with that idea in the past. Just try to find it. You can keep going. Yeah, we've definitely played around with a lot of exploration of ideas here, and that was actually my first thought. So I could try to bring it in for you. Let me just try to find it. Grab all these screens here.
So I think what Christoph is describing is basically like, if the checkbox is not checked, you just receive Bitcoin and you hold Bitcoin, the asset. And when it's checked, it gets converted automatically to US dollars. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, I just posted a few screens that are really archaic and kind of like the first ideas that we were playing around with. Like, you can choose your denomination at the top. You could also select to immediately convert this to Bitcoin upon receiving. Or there's also an additional selected toggle for receiving Bitcoins via on-chain. But I think just based on talking with everyone internally at Galoy, this wasn't the most eloquent direction or design. So we kind of like scrapped it. But yeah, perhaps we might want to spend some more time on that and reconsider those options as well. Any other questions on there, Kamal?
Yeah, I think Christoph liked your old version with the checkbox, and he thinks it feels more obvious, and the colorful toggle draws a lot of attention.
Yeah.
So might be an idea to revisit that also.
Will do. Just for the sake of time, I know that you guys are very gracious with your time here. I just want to go over the send screens and flow as well. So for the send, basically, you're able to select the currency at the top, send amount, very similar to any other experience so far in the wallet. You could choose a max amount. You're also able to see the USD wallet balance because you have chosen USD at the top. Because of the unique nature of Bitcoin Beach Wallet, we do have usernames and invoice addresses. So people can type in a particular invoice or paste in a particular invoice. They could obviously use the QR code scanner. And they could also type in a username, and that obviously presents a lot of screens on its own, but we do currently have that as an option. And of course, the optional note and label. This button is basically grayed out until you start inputting those field numbers and choosing your recipient. And I think the normal way we want to show the wallet address, for example, or the wallet invoice, Lightning invoice, is to basically just show the last six string characters and the first 6 string characters, followed by this grayed out light part of the wallet, so they could just really quickly identify and verify that they're sending it to the right recipient. So you could see that option for either kind of like the username or the address. And of course, that's not a Lightning address, and that will be changed. So I'm on top of that. So let's say based on what they chose, you could kind of see the confirm payment screens for either currency here. Send to, total amount, total fees, note description, send payment, and you could also see kind of a confirmation of everything that has transpired on that side. On that side, still working on the nomenclature, of course, but I think that kind of covers it there. More of a simple user flow than receive, I would say. I think that one's kind of it. Any questions on the send screens? I just wanted to cover maybe one last thing before we hop off here.
Yeah, one comment I want to make is, well, a quick comment on the previous screens as well, and then also on the
Sure
send.
thing.
I mean, one thing I just want to highlight the kind of conversation we've been having in the Bitcoin design community around using unified QR codes based on the BIP21 spec. It'd basically be a single QR code that would work for on-chain and Lightning. And it's too early days, just I think for every wallet to just go start generating these QR codes off the fly.
Correct.
But it would be really cool to start seeing support for scanning these types of things. So I don't think having a single QR code solves your receive flow issues. Right now, I don't think it gets you to where you want to be right now because it's just too early for that. But I just wanted to highlight that as a potential thing to consider and think about. I think Christoph posted a GitHub issue in the chat, and we have a channel in Slack called Unified QR Code where we're kind of discussing this topic further. In terms of the send flow, I noticed that, like on the receive, you're using yellow, and on the send, it's orange. And I noticed on the receive flow that you had this kind of toggle where it's like, okay, if you're receiving via Lightning, it's yellow. If you're receiving via on chain, it's orange. I might challenge that a little bit. Just that I think that as you pointed out, you want people to receive via Lightning. It's the better way. It's cheaper, quicker. It should be the predominant way that people receive, and you want to encourage users to do that as their first option, and on chain as the last option. And so it seems to me like we're saying that if we want them to send and receive Bitcoin via Lightning, that it's Bitcoin. And I would suggest, kind of a more consistent color approach to that. Like, if they're receiving via Lightning and that's Bitcoin, then the color difference doesn't make sense. Like, if we're implying that orange is on chain but their wallet is a single Bitcoin balance, so it doesn't matter if they receive on chain or via Lightning, it all goes into their Bitcoin balance. So it seems like it might make more sense to just keep that color unified throughout.
Yeah, and of course, there's a lot of moving parts, and you're kind of seeing something that is consolidating, but not completely consolidated. I duly noted. I completely agree with the notion you've brought forth. I think we're still working on the color scheme. Of course, like, we're still battling with the idea of like including on chain or whatnot. So is it just going to be orange? Is it just going to be yellow at this point? But yeah, I totally agree with you there, and I think, at least in the coming days and weeks, we should be able to consolidate everything more seamlessly. Thank you for that. Any other questions regarding send? Okay, so one question I really wanted to maybe ask the wider community is this kind of a prompt here. The intention of this particular prompt, and I know that it's kind of like very archaic looking, but the problem we're trying to solve for is that someone that comes from El Salvador, maybe El Zante, they're not even well versed in the difference between having Bitcoin amounts and a USD amount, which obviously equate to respective wallets. This can become a potential headache for the non-layman. And my designer brain wants to perhaps kind of handhold them in this part of the experience early on, or maybe we can relegate this to further down the line. And I think Kamal brought up a good point that we want, kind of the name of the game in the space is to like have a more seamless, more frictionless onboarding experience. We want to not necessarily bog down the user with writing down their mnemonic keys and backing up their keywords early on, because maybe they just get fed up and don't even get into the app itself. And I completely wholeheartedly agree with that. So the question here is, like, obviously we want to kind of give them some idea that there is going to be this fundamental change in the app. There's going to be two different wallets. We want to, at least for the next implementation, just default the wallet to Bitcoin. So my initial thought was like, we just put this prompt here. It tells them what is happening. They could just click to yes, I agree. Or maybe within the settings itself, they're able to choose their default primary wallet and change that from USD to Bitcoin. My alternative thought on this is to basically, whenever there's like an actual transaction coming in, maybe you receive the transaction, that's when you actually get the prompt, because you're just playing around for a few days or weeks with kind of a empty balance of a wallet. You're starting to learn more about Bitcoin. You're not ready to receive or send Bitcoin just yet. But as soon as something has transpired within the app, you're able to kind of get that onboarding experience and kind of that teachable moment and capture that more effectively. So I wanted to maybe hear your thoughts on that, because I know that from a user experience standpoint, like that's kind of a bigger challenge I want to really focus on.
There's one feedback from Christoph. He thinks it's a good idea to bring it up when it becomes relevant. So that's the second idea you had.
I want to go.
Patrick also.
Yeah,
Stephen.
so Stephen, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're actually okay. You actually had your hand raised first. I wanted to.
Okay, thank you. If I understand correctly, on the latter portion of what you just said, it seems like every time they're going to enter a transaction, they're going to be prompted to convert to USD or BTC. The concern would be that the user gets fatigued with those notifications. So maybe another option is if you don't add it up front, that prompt, maybe there's like almost when you're using an app from the Apple store, you're reminded periodically to rate the app. So maybe another way to do this is rather than prompting every time they do that transaction, it's after every 5 or 10 transactions, but it's not forgotten. They have to at some point acknowledge what they're doing.
I agree, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of just get their declaration earlier on. But perhaps it could just be a one-time prompt when they receive the very first transaction. And
but I think what you're struggling with is it's either at the very beginning or with every single transaction. So the middle ground would be, we don't want to burden them with that decision up front. We don't want to pester them with every transaction, but we can give them the prompt up front. But if they decline it or whatever the terminology would be, is that they are reminded at some point after so many transactions on a continuous basis until they make the final determination.
I guess in my mind, I wasn't thinking about a constant pestering. Let's just say, for the sake of this argument, like they just want to just use default Bitcoin wallet, and that's the only thing they know. They don't even know that a USD wallet exists. They're going to receive a Bitcoin transaction the very first time that that enters and is received into their wallet. Maybe there's just one time where they get that prompt saying, by the way, like we do have a USD wallet as well integrated into this app. You're more than happy to choose what your primary receiving wallet should be. And that's the only time they need to set that, right? Or if they want to change that over, you could go into the settings and change that as well. So that's why I wanted.
Well, if you're, I'm sorry to keep talking here, but if you're someone who's used to the BTC and that's what you want to do, that's fine. But then you guys are adding this functionality to protect against volatility. So that person, while they may be used to using BTC, they may actually benefit from the USD wallet and not know that they could benefit from it, because if over the month that they've been using the wallet, BTC's dropped by 30%, that USD wallet could have saved them. So it should not be, we shouldn't be hiding them from the value of why there is a USD wallet.
Okay. So yeah. I'd like to comment on this part of it. I think that I agree that there needs to be some form of like educational onboarding to this feature and to explain the benefit of it to them. I don't know that I think it should be postponed until it becomes relevant. The reason I say that is, I had an experience in Elzonte where I was, one of the Bitcoin wallets I was using was going through an upgrade or something, like it had updated in the background that had all this new stuff it wanted to tell me about. And I was in the middle of making a transaction. I kind of found that a little bit stressful. And I can echo that same sentiment just with other apps. If there's an app that you come to rely on in your daily life, whether it's a note-taking app or a navigation app or whatever, you start relying on it for daily usage, then suddenly when it interrupts you right when you're in the middle of a critical action, and wants you to make a decision about something, that can actually be kind of frustrating, and especially with financial software. I think that could be even more frustrating. So I think I think there definitely needs to be some kind of onboarding educational flow. I might suggest it as a, like, hey, we have a new feature called the US dollar wallet. Do you want to set it up now, or do you want to set it up later? And just make it real clear that it's like an optional thing, because that way, if one of these vendors is in the middle of a transaction, they don't have to feel pressured to make the decision right then and there. But I think you should remind them about it, not like pester them about it all the time, but just make sure that once every day or so you kind of remind them that this is a feature that they can benefit from.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And of course, I was in Elzonte about a month ago, and I noticed kind of like what the realistic needs are on the ground. And I tend to agree with both of you. I think maybe not necessarily having a prompt like this, but maybe even just having a toast that periodically notifies them that, hey, we do have a USD wallet feature. I mean, then that could be a low-hanging fruit solution. So it's not necessarily pestering them too often. And like, just because this isn't a full rollout of the USD integration, we do want to play around with like how, like, keeping the user out of volatility, and perhaps at the same time utilizing more Bitcoin, exposure. And those things are in the long haul. But maybe because there's only a black or white, solution or decision making process here with either USD or Sats, if the user knows that their risk tolerance is more leaning towards USD, whether there's quite a lot of volatility depending on the cycle within the price action, they can just choose either from here itself, like maybe there could be another row for wallet selection, or maybe we could just, for now, for the sake of implementing this in a relatively short period of time, we could just have it in the settings and rely on toasts to remind the user if they haven't set it up yet, and going through that kind of educational onboarding process. I think maybe that might be the best way to kind of like balance everything out. I'm not sure how long we want to go for. I think that's the top of the hour, Kamal. Any thoughts on wrapping this up?
Yeah, we're at the top of the hour. I think that was very, very helpful. Obviously, a very complex UX challenge here that we have with different wallets and different denominations and the option to switch around and convert and transfer. Yeah, I think you shared the Figma, right? And all the participants who have a link should be able to comment and go through the screens if they like to. And we would appreciate it a lot if you left comments and gave us feedback, because yeah, we haven't done this before. So and we want to nail it as best as possible. And also thanks for all the links. There is definitely a couple of, there's also already been a lot of thought going into this in the design community that we haven't been aware of, and we will need to catch up on. So thanks for sharing that. And yeah, I think that was very helpful for us, and we will be keeping you guys updated. And thanks a lot.
Hey, real quick, I just want to say I'm super happy to see all the Figma designs you're working on, and really great work shipping this feature. You know, I think the dollar balance is a much needed feature, and appreciate all the time and thought you've put into these boards. And I also want to say that I'm really happy to see you know, companies getting involved with the design community in this way. That's really good. So you're setting an awesome example here.
Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much,
I'm really
Stephen.
looking forward to it as well with you guys.
All right.